very pleased to introduce a very good friend and colleague, Dr. Hake, who is part of Cotton Incorporated. He's the Vice President for Agriculture and Environmental Research at Cotton Incorporated. If you don't know anything about Cotton Incorporated, you probably know one of their famous slogans. It is, "Cotton, the fabric of our lives." That's where it comes from. And so Kate is going to kick us off really talking about the hands-on, boots-on-the-ground issues of agriculture, this kind of climate, and dealing with climate variability, and how do you really work with people that are actually trying to take what we do as science and make it part of the reality, and what kind of outcomes we expect. So Kate, we're glad you're here. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, particularly doing those great introductions. I have two children that are your age, all of your age, and so I'll offer my one what's unique about me is I do an outstanding job of balancing structured work and non-structured work for others, right? And I do that because I love what I do. And so it makes it real easy. It's just a continuum. And so anytime I'm not doing structured work, I'm either with family, or I'm working out at the gym because my wife sleeps in, or we're going hiking with family. So I handle that well. But the secret is to really love what you're doing, and it's just one big continuum, and you don't worry about it. So let me take the opportunity to not turn this off. Oh, there we go. To not turn this off, but tell you just a little bit about my background, so at the end you can decide, boy, I really don't want to go down that path. And because I have done something unique within an academic environment, I've been a revolving door. I've gone in and out between industry and university or public service over time. So just a little bit on that. I have two degrees from UC Davis. I want to be a plant breeder, but I was color challenged. One of you was vision challenged and couldn't be an astronomer. I'm color challenged, red, green. I want to be a plant breeder, and so I just couldn't do it. I realized that, but I studied barley, and then I did a transition jobs for 1 year each, working a wide variety of crops, including for the Gallo family, managing grapes and alfalfa on way too much acreage. And then I got into a university environment where I was a cotton extension specialist, worked citrus and grapes and cotton, so I keep adding to my litany of crops. So the first take-home message is that get that diversity of agriculture, because the really neat things are what cotton does that citrus doesn't, or grapes do that almonds don't. And look for those kind of things. We get so siloed into the way cotton does it. And unfortunately, this is going to be a cotton-centric presentation. But feel free to ask about any aspects of agriculture. I did it for close to 40 years. So I left the extension service after 9 months, and I have done a really good job of creating lots of extension publications. And so that was the second take-home message. I did everything possible, not knowing that it was the right thing to do, to expand my reputation and visibility beyond the little area I was responsible for. And so I was asked to start a new producer education program called Cotton Physiology Education Program. It was a $500,000 funded program. We built a newsletter, monthly newsletter, up to 17,000 mail-outs based on request only. So growers loved it, and it was very successful. And then I came to love it because I really loved extension. I really wanted to be a state extension specialist. That's sort of the pinnacle of extension. And if you're cotton, having that position in Texas is the pinnacle. So I came here, I did that for 4 years, and loved it. Really, the growers here, you'll see a lot of pictures of them, are just really neat, salt of the earth people, just brutally honest, because their environment's brutally honest with them. And then I started doing a little things in international. I learned to really like international agriculturalists. You know, when you go overseas to a foreign country, those people that fall into agriculture are just the most giving people available. They're just incredibly society-oriented, really want to give. You know, if you're in some of these countries and you're focused on personal wealth, you don't go into agriculture. So the ones that take a choice to go into agriculture really want to make a contribution. So that was really exciting. So I had the opportunity to go work for what at that time was a medium-sized seed company. They wanted to get an international division started, so they asked me to run everything technical outside of the U.S. So I spent a lot of time in this country. And at that time, the company was very reluctant to talk about their international activities to U.S. farmers. So I pretty much fell off the radar screen with U.S. growers. I learned a huge, huge amount about the different cultures, production systems, and it was a very rewarding time period for everyone except my daughter, as I took an international trip every month, which that means you're at least 2 weekends or 3 weekends. So September's all of a sudden gone, and then the company was actually trying to break away from Monsanto, and so they wanted to have a biotech department to evaluate new technologies and bring them in. And they asked me to lead that, and that was great. I had to teach myself. Actually, when I did my college work, molecular biology was being offered for the first time at UC Davis in 1976 or 1975. Ray Valentine was the presenter, one of the early inventors in the field. So I had to reteach myself molecular biology and biochemistry and all those things. And I was pretty much a standalone person working with a bunch of lawyers. So I learned how to read these 4-inch thick contracts in real detail. That was a real struggle initially, but again, it's a great skill. And I can go through financial documents and find mistakes that other people have just passed over. I scared our CFO. I found a couple mistakes that he had copied over year after year after year. He had added a number of tons of soybeans sold and a number of bags of cottonseed sold, and added those together in one column. One's a ton and one's 250,000 seed. It doesn't make any sense to add them together and report that as an important metric and all that. So then that company was bought out, and I spent a month looking for work, networking with everyone. I had a friend that said, "Peter, we've got a job opening. Why don't you come work for us?" And once they offered me a job with a really nice pay raise above what I was getting, it took about 2 minutes to say, "Great, when can I start?" And I've landed in the absolute dream job for me. That's why I told them about it. So what Cotton Incorporated is, it's a checkoff commodity organization. All of the major crops have commodity organizations that handle research and promotion. Are you all familiar with Cotton Incorporated? In our ads, maybe, on that. That has been our historic main objective, but behind the scenes, we've actually grown quite dramatically our research. So both agriculture research and textile research. And the agriculture research is all done out-house, so to speak, and I have the fun pleasure of working with people like John Zach, and actually we're supporting 280 academic and USDA labs around the U.S., a lot of people across the street, other people at Texas Tech. And so we have a just an outstandingly fun job to interact with them and try to find ways that we can use innovative science to solve agricultural problems. But so I'd like to break this talk into a little bit about why it's great that you're doing what you're doing, a little bit about the challenges that growers face, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the the areas that would be great to go into to try to solve their problems, and how growers make decisions, how to interact with growers would be a natural part of that. So this was a famous diagram that you've all seen. The citation index on it is just through the roof. It was briefly updated by one of the co-authors. And even that citation index is just through the roof, considering the time there was a follow-on paper. But those three big off the planet are related to agriculture, right? Biodiversity, deforestation, nitrogen. Agriculture is a major contributor, and phosphorus is a major contributor. So there's a huge need for your expertise in this big graphic. But if we look at even what I think is even a more powerful discussion than that one, with these two publications, we have a reader back here, a book reader. Have you read?
Actually, no.
Okay, I just read the reviews on it. But the Reader's Digest version is available on TPS. There's a fantastic, in November, The Life of E.O. Wilson. If you haven't seen that, it's just outstanding. It pretty much goes through the background of getting here. His premise is that we are dependent upon ecosystem services. It's incredibly complex. We don't understand it all, particularly when you have the microbes and the insects and everything else tied in. By the time we figure it out, it's going to be too late. So at the same time we're trying to figure it out, let's just put half of the marine environment and half of the terrestrial environment aside while we sort it out, so we don't go over the edge and miss things. A great premise, but what does that do for agriculture? And so this other paper, just a very nice discussion on how sustainable intensification, which is a buzzword that's coming along, how that can help to spare nature, and as E.O. Wilson brings that together, what does that mean for us? And some of the recent papers, did you all see this was Nature Communications about a month ago? Did you see this one about the trade-offs, about diets and technology and deforestation? Just a really, really nice paper. The unfortunate thing is when you grab a graphic off a PDF paper, they're just really hard to display and understand. But basically, it's showing that the green is where it's feasible, and the other colors are where it's less feasible. And it's basically showing this, unless we move to a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet, we're either giving up massive amounts of forest, or else we're adopting absolute cutting-edge sciences with agriculture. So we've got some trade-offs that we have to think about. And this paper really goes into it nicely. And another paper that digs into even a little bit further on the ecosystem services. So we're seeing some really nice discussions about how ecosystem services and agriculture and climate change are all sort of blending together. It's a fluid space. Again, this was a real recent in Nature Plants. You all look at Nature Plants. It's been a fun new, about a year old, but a good blend of agriculture and plant sciences. But this one looks at a nice way to understand sustainable intensification on both the spatial scale, which is the vertical axis from individual field to the global, and the temporal from economic efficiency for a season to the long term of agronomic sustainability on that. And very simply looking at some of the ecosystem services that farmers are going to want to adopt because it enhances their quality of life and their profitability, such as the ones on the bottom, the biocontrol, pollination services, soil maintenance, but some that are not necessarily directly correlated with on-farm profitability, some in the middle. And so how that prioritization really plays out from the standpoint of farmer adoption. So with that, let me talk a little bit about your impact in this space. And it's part of the reason that doing anything with agriculture can be just so rewarding, besides getting to work with farmers who really, really appreciate help. But if you just do the simple math on impact, any small increases, the 1% increase, once you multiply that times acres and you recognize that a good idea out there never gets retracted in modern agriculture, you just have this huge compounding effect of benefits. This is a friend of mine who's an agronomist in Mexico, and not only from the numbers I give you are U.S. centric, but as you know, so much of the agriculture innovation that's created in Australia, in Israel, in the U.S. Has led to tremendous benefits around the world. And obviously, our nearest neighbors are the ones that are the most immediate recipients. So I hope I absolutely convinced you that what you're doing is the right thing. You've chosen a great career path, and having agriculture as part, it doesn't have to be central, but as a part of your activities. It's just a very nice, rewarding space. So let's go move it into the challenges that agriculture faces. And the first one I want to dismiss with one slide, but it's an elephant in the room anytime you talk about sustainability, and that is the confusion that's out there, the non-science component of sustainability. This actually is Germany. This is Puma's headquarters, and I had a chance to meet with their sustainability people, and to try to get them to think science on sustainability. So I used this slide. Do you all recognize what happened in that field right across from their headquarters? That was moldboard plow. Europe still extensively moldboards plow, a technology which has largely been relegated to, they've been melted down here in the U.S. and Brazil is actually the world's leader. Brazil still down there in Argentina. But Europe still, moldboard plows fairly late into the fall. There was no cover crop on this, giving up a tremendous resource. So the discussion with them was really fun about what is sustainable and what is not. A big chunk of the sustainability communication is not about science. So we're going to take that, we're just going to move that off the table from the discussion camp. I'd be glad to answer any questions on that, but I think it's important to set the marketing components off to the side and really drill down into the science. So let's jump into some of the legitimate questions that farmers have and some of the challenges they face. So we're going to go through this sort of as a way as how cotton grows from a winter standpoint. And the first one's going to talk about surface residues. That field in Germany really should have a surface residue there. Plenty of moisture, heat units being wasted, great opportunity. But here in West Texas, where we have very limited rainfall, growing surface residue is a real tough challenge. You can use your rain to grow a surface residue, and Dr. Zach and I are working with a grower that wrestles with this question, and he would love to have some help in trying to figure out how much of his rain should he use to grow surface residue. And he looks at how much water he has in the soil bank, and he tries to anticipate that he could get 4 more inches this winter, so he can utilize 4 inches if his soil bank is full to grow a wheat crop, and he's got to grow the wheat crop at a certain point to terminate it. So these are very challenging questions that he faces, and he relies on his and his dad's history in that property and rainfall patterns. And so climate variability, climate change, boy, that throws a monkey wrench into what they remember from 1960, 1980, 2010. So the climate variability is just a huge disruptor in the way that farmers operate. We go a little bit further, and farmers know that cotton roots, this is a little seed that the cotton root grows, particularly here in West Texas, where the soils tend to be generally loose and friable, can penetrate a very rapid depth in a short time, and that the ET during the summer, cotton, unlike corn, keeps its stomates open under moderate stress. So it has one of the highest daily water uses of of any crop. I think it reaches over pan evaporation. What would you get coming off the swimming pool for a little bit of time. And so growers know that that you're going to have that huge water suck during the July period, August period, and so you need to have that full reservoir. But here in West Texas, where you have limited and declining water resources, how much of that do you want to put into filling the profile, or do you want to save that water when you really need it in July? Really, really tough questions that growers wrestle with. In fact, when I was here as the cotton specialist in the mid-1990s, the advice that we gave to growers was wrong. And because the data set that we were relying on wasn't as robust, and it was only recently that we had a really good, robust data set that says, don't waste any of your water trying to pre-plant on irrigation, but save every last drop you can for that incredibly important July and August time period. Another really tough question that growers struggle with here is that their crop has a season-long vulnerability to hail. And it can be in planting, it can be right before harvest. It's actually, if it's at planting time, we cry a little bit, but when it's right before harvest, we really cry. It's just devastating at that time. And oftentimes there are not insurance programs to cover the ones right at harvest. We sort of anticipate we're going to get a harvest. And growers think, are there things I can do to avoid it? Now that we have a little bit longer growing season, and now that we have technologies that compress it, are there ways that we can avoid it? And I know Dr. Jack is looking at these kind of questions. Are there windows, probabilistic windows that help us here? But also the whole issue of whether I should replant. The standard practice in the past to make a replant decision was to look at it and then come back in 3 or 4 days and look at it again. And if it wasn't making progress or wasn't making the progress you thought was adequate, it gets yanked out and fresh seed maybe with my pocket gets put in. What a great opportunity for remote sensing with a drone. Really see very precisely whether you're on track for pushing out new leaves and recovering. Some great opportunities there for that. Another question as we go along in the season that growers struggle with, less so on the high plains here, but more where soils are sandy and they get high rainfall. This is Brazil. This is a good friend of mine, Edson Maeda. And he grew at one point he grew 25,000 hectares of cotton, and he would spend the summer 6.5 days driving around looking at it, and the next 6.5 days driving around and looking at it. And I had the fun opportunity to do that for 1 week, one cycle with him. It was really, really neat. And he just gets out and walks and talks. But the nitrogen, as you know, is very transitory in soils, but it's essential, particularly in soils that are very, oxysols like they have in Brazil down there. And so his question is, where is my soil nitrogen? Should I apply more? In fact, it's one of the things I helped him diagnose on one of his farms. He was suffering severe nitrogen deficiency early on in the planting. It just wasn't there. He was coming in too late with his first application. And so we talked about that and diagnosed it in the field. But he also worries about the flip side of nitrogen. This is the response curve of nitrogen with large plots, all 21 locations, 3 years worth of data. So really solid data. And this is both the applied and soil reservoir nitrogen. And you can see the downside curve in terms of yield there is even steeper than the front side curve. So really critical. Is that nitrogen in the root zone or is it not? Because you hate to put expensive inputs on and push it over the curve. Another question that growers are really struggling with right now, and it's thanks to corn. Goddamn corn at $8 a bushel, $7 a bushel has created havoc in the Southeast because growers wanted to grow corn at that price, and they knew because of drought and sandy soils and aflatoxin, some of those really nasty things that come in on droughted corn. So they put in massive amounts of irrigation. Mississippi Delta is now over half irrigated. I think Georgia, they get close to 40% irrigated. Just, incredible investments in irrigation. But how do you irrigate when you can get a 4-inch rain over the weekend? And your fields get waterlogged and the nitrogen gets leached out and you bring in all sorts of diseases and anaerobic conditions. So the whole irrigation on these kind of under high rainfall environments, just a huge challenge. We can schedule irrigations in California, Arizona really, really well. I think you can even do it, love it really, really well because you don't have much water. But in Georgia and Southeast, it's a huge challenge for those guys. I interact with your counterpart in the Southeast Climate Consortium, and I really have a fun time because they represent a lot, not only the agriculture, but also the coastal challenges, as you can imagine in Florida, the sea level rise. Another challenge that growers have, which is a unique to cotton problem, is that cotton is an indeterminate crop. And so you can keep go, or you can say, it's time to put some money in the bank and take my chips off the table and go home, and stop rolling the dice on it. But cotton does give you that ability, but we never know what the weather's going to be, whether that hail's going to come. Should we harvest safely or push for more bolls at the top of the plant? Because we've gone now to varieties that are more indeterminate. We now have chemical growth regulators, anti-gibberellins. Methylpropyl chloride is a very modest anti-gibberellant, and so you don't get the excessive growth if you push it hard with nitrogen and water. So that allows you to go much longer in the season if you really want to, but you can get into serious injury. And then there's another really unique cotton issue, and the cotton is a raw industrial product, and it has to fit just like a bolt or a screw into this very complex engine that's called Textiles, and if it doesn't fit, it's worthless. The value of cotton as a cellulosic fuel is not too good, and so it has to create very precise specifications for spinability. And here I show you a couple of the extremes on that. Cotton grows like a tree, but it adds new rings to the inside. So everything, it adds a new ring. And you can stop its growth at any time. You don't have a very thick cell wall, and it gives you all sorts of problems with breakage and dye uptake. Or you can, because it's that indeterminate product, you can add extra bolls at the top. But that's what happens to the fibers at the bottom. They're open, they're exposed to microbes, and there's plenty of microbes that do a great job of feeding on cellulose, and so the quality degrades from a surface standpoint. So the whole challenge of when should I harvest for maximum profit? Quality is hugely critical for cotton. Your price can be degraded to a point where it's just not feasible to harvest the crop. I'll show you some economics on harvesting. It's very, very expensive in cotton. And if you don't have a crop of a certain quality, it's just not even worth harvesting. So let's talk a little bit about how farmers make these decisions. Because that's the really fun thing to see what are the processes that they go through in their minds. But before I jump into that, are any questions on some of these challenges? Anything that you want to push back on or ask about? Oh, yeah.
So I'm assuming when you're talking about irrigation, it's all about putting water on the land and not as much pulling it off. Is that the case, or not quite so much? What do you usually see, like up here versus, like southeast Texas versus the rest of the Gulf Coast?
Excellent question. No, you're totally true that here it's more about getting water on the field. In fact, growers have installed production practices like furrow grinding that actually prohibits the runoff. But you go to other areas where you get these really intense rainfalls, and drainage systems are critical. In the cotton area, they tend to use surface drainage systems, and that's worked out very well. As those of you from the Midwest, up to southern Indiana, I'm originally from Iowa. To go with subsurface drainage, which is creating all sorts of havoc, with the Raccoon River and the city of Des Moines being having the water being high nitrate and coming from subsurface drainage. So you have to survive getting the water off the field is even a bigger problem elsewhere. So let me jump into the growers' business. That's a fun part. And we talked about many of the challenges they make, and growers have to make decisions. You have to go right or go left. You can't just, well, I'll skip that decision and put that back on the desk. Like we can. I work in an office situation. I can procrastinate on a whole bunch of things. But the crops are going to keep growing and growing and growing. So you cannot procrastinate on a decision at all. You kind of make something. And so obviously, looking at what's going in the field is job one historically. And if you think about the difficulty of doing that in either roots or soil, it's extremely difficult. This is one of the few growers that I've met that actually walks into the field with a soil probe. That's a 6 foot tall soil probe. His major concern is where the moisture is, and he's a pretty tough, pretty stocky guy, and he can stand on that thing or lean on it. Goes down 6 feet because he's been a long-term no-till. If there's moisture down there, if there's moisture only 2 feet, he'll go 2 feet. But obviously he doesn't do that in too many parts of the field. But it's very common on the above ground for growers just to walk and walk and walk. I've been with growers where you go in and look at the field, that's a 1.5 mile or 2 mile walk. You go all the way down one field, down and all the way back. And you get a really good sense of what's going on in the above ground. But the below ground, just not really difficult. Even with the sensor technologies we have, those are largely very contained to a very small spot. So any clever ideas you have that help farmers understand what's going on below ground, that would be huge. Weather forecast, obviously they're in tune to weather forecasting. They're looking at it all the time, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can help them in that. That would be one of the biggest gifts that science could give agriculture is a better weather forecast. Another thing that farmers do to help them make decisions is that a lot of them rely on scouts. These are people that they call a consultant. They go out and collect field data, and the beauty of the scout is they do this summer after summer after summer, and they do it after field after field after field for multiple growers. So they'll look at a whole bunch of cotton, not just that one grower's fields. And so they can get a feel, they can be an independent eyes about what's going on out in the field. And historically, they've been focused on saying spray, don't spray for various insects. But now that we've adopted more of an IPM approach, they've expanded their services to fertilization and disease and variety selection, but having an independent source has been really helpful. And also the extension service has done an awesome job of moving into high technology and adopting things like tweets and email services. Hey, we saw this new problem out there. It's resistant to this class of pesticides. You might want to watch for these beneficials. Just a very simple type communication that's just very, very fast. Helps farmers make those decisions that they have to make. Another way that they make decisions is they're financially constrained. And this is the cotton budget for irrigated cotton for 2016, developed by Texas A&M, by Jackie Smith. He's the extension economist here for this area. And I've shown from highest to lowest the cost. I think the total cost I have on there is $940 an acre. That does not include a $30 per acre return turn to management. So a lot of these farmers are starting the year knowing that they're going to make zero money, that they're going to spend the whole year working. Best case scenario is they don't lose any money, they may make zero. Think about the motivation, that would be really tough for most of us on that. But they sit down with their bankers and they talk about how much money they can afford to put into various areas. And you can see irrigation, obviously, a huge cost. And then ginning, growers don't complain about that. Because the higher the yields, the more the ginning costs. So that and harvesting, are not the kind of things they complain about. Because harvesting here in West Texas is largely a function of yield. The fertilization is the third bucket. That's a big one. Fertilization and seed, which is black, that's a big chunk of their total budget that's got to go in the ground, right? Yes.
Now, obviously some of these costs are inflexible. You can't really change them one way or the other.
And I've blended it together. So like irrigation is both the energy and the equipment.
So where do you see them try to really control these costs the most? Like in crop prediction, if they say, okay, well we can only afford $800 an acre, where do they tend to try to squeeze that out?
Unfortunately, it's the things at the end of the season they get truncated. Or on a more sophisticated level, they'll say, I've spent all I can spend on insect control, and that budget is wiped out. So there's a lot of inflexibility in this area. Now, in terms of how growers can save money, the growers that have been frivolous with their funds, they now have city jobs, and someone else is farming that land. Anytime you have these roller coasters of commodity prices, when you're down here for a couple of years, the non-efficient growers, they're out, and they're on other jobs, and the land is managed by the more efficient. So I firmly believe that there's not a whole lot of money to wring easily on it. Now the seed, there's a real possibility, the soybean set an example, we can have generic biotech traits. And soybean has started through the public sector to have generic Roundup Ready. These things are coming off patent, so there's some real optimism. Seed cost is a huge one that's grown dramatically. Growers have the options of non-biotech, but they like the convenience and the net profitability of transgenic. But if generics were available, they would definitely go for that. The fertilizer, probably the greatest opportunity there is precision application. I'll show you some data later on. The adoption of grid sampling is through the roof. And so growers know that there's a whole bunch of that field does not need fertilizer, and they're not going to put it on. Good question.
Peter, we have a question here.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you were talking more about the labor sector.
What aspect? I don't go into labor too much.
Well, I'm just wondering what is encompassing that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. But the labor budget is virtually nil, honestly. I rolled a little bit of labor into the harvesting. Nowadays, it's not uncommon where you'll have a 1,000-acre operation here in West Texas that would be 2 people. And now at the gin, you have a lot more labor, but actually running the farm, so the labor requirements have gone down dramatically in U.S. agriculture. Now, outside of vegetables, and my nephew is an organic farmer in California who farms 10 acres. And his labor, there's 3 families working on 10 acres, so very, very intense. But the big row crop acreage here, the agriculture is the labor is largely off the farm. It's servicing equipment, designing equipment, coming up with the innovations. It's you all, it's Dr. Zach, it's people like me. So the labor is moved, and the people are actually the site people that are pushing the button. Those are dramatically reduced. Good question. So another aspect of making those decisions is we're seeing farmers more and more are relying on trusted websites. And we've made a huge effort to try to facilitate. We've partnered with American Phytopathological Society, American Society of Agronomy, and the American Entomological Society. They have a website where they house webcasts, and we've learned that growers love these. In fact, the downloads on these are usually 1,500 to 2,000 for each individual one. And I just pulled out a couple because it illustrates why growers love it. When I was in Extension, the model was this huge winter meeting. We tell growers everything they need to know in August. We tell that to them in January, February. Now, it's not a really good way to convey essential information. They want it when they want it. And so these two examples, these are both esoteric pathogens, viruses that are wiping out Pakistan and India and parts of China, but they haven't invaded us here. The grower may remember what a virus-infected plant might look like from its basic course. And in that walking in the field, he looks down and sees something. Oh my gosh, that could be it. He now has a resource. He can go to 2 pages in this webinar. He can spend 30 seconds and say, that looks familiar, doesn't look familiar, and he can move on. If it looks familiar, hopefully he'll look at the whole thing. And if it still looks familiar, hopefully he'll get a hold of someone and get a professional out there to look at it. Same way with Fusarium on that. So this has been providing information exactly when they want it in a mobile format. It's been a real revolutionary. We've also got this cotton cultivated that tries to bring as much of the university information together with these cultivated Google search engines. Been really successful on that. Another way that farmers make decisions is they have trusted friends, they have experts that they interact with and they develop a relationship with. So very much it's a community, a neighborhood on the information. And another aspect, even though it may be just a father and son that are working on that, there may be a cousin on another farm, and it may be that there will be 10 landlords that own that property, and maybe family members who are now off the farm. So many of these decisions are a family-based decision where where everyone that has some sweat equity in it is engaged in that decision. And certainly the person that's pushing the button, he really wants that, right? You want a whole bunch of people, lined up saying, yeah, let's press it. Because you never know how these things are going to play out on agriculture. And much of the farming, even though mom and dad may not be directly involved in the farm, they still have a 30-year history or a 40-year history on that field, and so they get involved in that discussion. It goes back to how useful is a 30-year history when it was 1940 through 1970, and now we're in 2016. With climate variability, is that negative information? Is that positive information? How can we, take that information and put it today? So let me talk a little bit about how you can help, because that's really what John thinks I came in here to share some information, but really I came here to grab you guys and get good ideas out of you. So let me throw some things out that how you can help. And the number one thing is to engage farmers. They have huge observational skills, and they learn things like way before people got PhDs. One of the best examples is a farmer in California. The irrigation water was 11.5 deciliters per liter, which is off the roof. You would spit it out if you drank it. Very toxic to most crops. He was growing cotton with it, and he would plant in the bottom of a water furrow and just keep the water running over this very gravelly soil to get it to emerge. It emerged slowly, and he had taken a water analysis and soil analysis, and I was an extension person. That's why he called me out, was to look at it. And I said, I think you're a little low on some nutrients. He said, I tried fertilizer. I tried it 30 years ago. some guy came out here and wanted to sell me some phosphorus fertilizer. Fortunately, his rig broke down halfway through one pass. Nothing grew in that field for 3 years when he put that phosphate fertilizer out. Now, when a farmer says that a rig went through the field, broke down halfway, told me to get off the field, nothing grew there, that's an observation that you need to believe. Well, it turned out about 40 years after he made that observation, someone got a PhD at East California Davis for showing that phosphorus and salinity have a negative interaction. When you think about applying phosphorus to the field, it's going to be very stable there. It's going to take a while for it to be moved out, even a very gravelly, sandy soil. So and I had the same example. This was a grower I was meeting with one of my board members 2 weeks ago in Missouri, and he has this outrageously thick cover crop, John, that he's only tried for 3 years. He's been long-term no-till, and the cotton was just growing to beat the band. And I say, you know, the weather must have been awesome when this came out the ground, because it's long stems, and he said, no, it was the worst weather. And he said, it has to do with the cover crop is forcing the cotton to get taller and to compete for it. You know, and so his observations were just spot on with that. So and engaging farmers is really, really easy. I want to throw this up because Dr. Kimura is the new extension agronomist for Vernon, Texas. And her ancestry is Japanese. Her studies were Wyoming and Washington. And I've had the chance to watch her interact with growers. And they could care less what her ancestry is. It's all about the value that she brings to them. And they recognize right off the bat she brings a huge amount of value. And even in a place that we don't think of being culturally highly diverse, such as Vernon, Texas, it's a really successful relationship between an extension person and the local farming community. So probably, as I mentioned earlier, one of the real things that farmers would love is a better weather forecast. This is a science paper I did this last year. And the slope of those lines, so that the top of that line is northern hemisphere, the bottom of the line is the southern hemisphere. This is weather accuracy, forecast skill as a percent. And I believe that this is rain on that. And you can see the slope of that line is 1 day per decade. We're not making a whole lot of progress in our ability to forecast. And the article says that the big change between northern and southern hemisphere, what happened at about that time? Use of satellites. So the southern hemisphere started using satellites for weather forecasting. It caught up to the northern hemisphere. We're saying the limiting factor is computing power. So a lot of optimism that computation power can solve that. But here's the best example of why a better forecast would be used. So here is Lubbock, Texas, and these are long-term weather records, and you've got some sort of error bars. I think those are 75% distribution around the other side. Here's Sinjar, Urumqi, Sinjar. Look at the latitude of that. That's a major cotton growing hub, yields twice of what Lubbock are. That is halfway between the northern border of Iowa and Minneapolis. And that is a big, major cotton growing region in China. But look at the error bars around that. If you have my type of cheap $20 Swatch watch, you look at your watch, you see the time and the date. You know what the weather is outside. The weather is highly predictable because they're downstream of the Himalayan plateau, and so it works out beautifully for that type of farm. That's where that picture of me earlier on in China was. That's one of the military farms. The PLA has the farms, and you can see they're laid out beautifully, and they're operated like a military operation. Turn the page, this is what we do. Turn the next page, this is what we do. Very, very predictable. And they use plastic, so it has to do with their agronomic efficiency is super, super good. Long-term sustainability is very questionable, because that plastic, there's two sheets of plastic. They take the top one off, the bottom one gets mixed into the soil. And so now 20 years of mixing a layer of plastic into the root zone, you can imagine what that does for root growth. And also, what's their water source? It's glacier melt, right? Got 20-year life cycle on it. So long-term sustainability is not there, but short-term, they can push it to the max. So just to show you a little bit, and obviously having tighter variances in the spring is huge for a whole bunch of reasons. I think you get the idea of this, but we would love to be able to take those broad curves and tighten them. And we're not going to change the weather to make it more variable. In fact, it's going the other way. But if you can give growers a little bit more predictability, that is huge. Keeping money in their pockets, or they have a lot of tools, particularly a crop like cotton, with irrigation and fertilization and growth regulators to make some decisions. Or call their banker and say, we got problems. So that would be good. Another thing that you can do is help them get ready for a data-rich future. It is coming so fast. All of the big equipment they can buy from John Deere now has the connectability to measure real-time TPS what's going on in the tractor, and that's reported to John Deere so they can say, you've got a filter problem or there's a design problem. But the sophisticated growers are already using that to help them make decisions and capture that. It's turning into a plug and play. Give us a better crop model. That would be obvious. And we love the AgNIP concept. I don't think that Rosenwald is including cotton in that because there's not as big an effort. But AgNIP and the other crops look very promising. Data sharing. And another thing that, look at that bottom point here. We talked about farm scales. That not only is large in terms of acres, but it's large in terms of miles. So farmers tend to be, have a farm scattered out. And so now we don't need to know what the rainfall is exactly on one field. They've got, one of my board members I talked with last week in Georgia, Teal, he manages 100 pivots. They're scattered all over. He doesn't need to know whether the rainfall is going to occur on this pivot. He wants to know are 70% of the area going to get some rain, because that's going to help him make some decisions on the overall farming operation. So even the probabilistic answers are really helpful. The computing power is expanded. This is a science outlook that was about 4 months ago. I apologize, I'm giving you reference to one I can pull out for you. But we know that the computing power is going to grow. We also need to make precision agriculture a lot easier for farmers. This is the adoption curve based on the surveys that we do. Both of these surveys, the 2008 2015, captured 10% of the U.S. cotton acres, and the bottom ones are really lagging. You can see yield monitors, satellite imagery, sensors for irrigation sensing. Some of those have stalled at 20%. And you talk to growers, it's just not easy. And they got so many demands on their time. Making these things so they're easy to collect the data and easy to use the data, really, really important. And as part of making it easy, we also have to create outreach programs that will encourage people to adopt new technology. I love these examples because you look at all three of those. They're hugely successful marketing programs that encourage people to buy something that they never thought they even knew they needed on that. And so applying marketing, and I love hearing that several of you are in the sociology sphere. Marketing to farmers. I don't think these are the right messages. I love the one in the center with the boss, and it makes you both look good. That's not the right message for something with farmers. Most of them look like me. Anything we can do on water is going to be an absolute plus. Obviously, on a site-specific, that's the #1 limitation around the world, the competition for water. Biodiversity is sort of a little bit further away in terms of impacting farmers, but water, capturing water, minimizing runoff or maximizing runoff if you have too much. Supplemental irrigation, how do you mix 4 inches of irrigation in with 50 inches of rainfall? You know, how do you balance that? Stress tolerant problems, soil and root health, all really, really important. And here's an example again from the 2015 Natural Resource Survey. We all the growers that irrigated, we were able to capture their water use efficiency, and a very good number for West Texas is somewhere around 50 pounds of fiber per acre inch of applied irrigation water. So this is the added benefit you get above dry land. And you can see we have growers down at the end, they're actually applying water and losing yield. So helping these growers, not just the bell cow at the top end, but helping those down there. That's really, really important. This is something that Dr. Zach is working on. This is what soil in some of the toughest places to have healthy soil, the coastal plain of South Carolina, looks like when you had 28 years of corn cotton rotation with a no-till versus conventional till. 28 years to get there. Oh, we'd love to get there faster if we could understand the microbial differences. And you're beginning to look at that, see that, just like John is seeing here in West Texas, see a huge increase in microbial diversity by going with no-till type and working with Dr. Zach, trying to utilize this great science of medicine with gut microbes and looking at the perfect parallels with soil microbes. And a couple references in science do a really nice job. In fact, the 2012 reference created this diagram, and I just added some lines at the bottom to continue. But everything we're learning about the human microbiome, the gut microbiome, seems to have a parallel with what's good for a soil microbiome as well. So lots of optimism there that we're going to solve. And, another way that you can help is we've got to continue to push yields up. Costs don't go backwards. We saw that huge cost of $940. Prices for commodities historically have been very stable in non-inflated dollars, in real dollars. And so we've got to keep pushing yields up, not only from a profitability standpoint, but also the E.O. Wilson's math curve. If we're ever going to get there, we've just got to be willing to just invest in productivity. Resilience is one of the areas that growers often don't talk about, but is really, really important to them. When margins are slim, you cannot afford to have a bad year. Now you think about a developing country farmer, his margins are obviously life or death. It's not a matter of losing money the family doesn't eat. So resilient systems, whether it's developed or developing world, and here's one of my favorite examples of that. Wild palms are very resilient. If they go into drought stress, they stop producing fiber and they put their resources in the sea. One of the scientists that we find, Dr. Foss, at USD has discovered the gene that allows the seed to stop producing fiber and put all the resources in the seed. And actually growers see that under drought stress, you get these big, healthy seeds, like great, nice, gorgeous seeds, but really, really lousy fiber. And that's a gene that we'd love to turn off to make the system more resilient for fiber production and not seed production. So some things that we can do beyond the field scale. I want to stress to you that growers see stress tolerance as a huge priority. They do look at it a little bit based on what happened last year or what's happening right now. So this is the 2 surveys that we conducted with producer priorities. Again, we're getting 10% of the acres. We gave them 27 options, and in 2011, you can see a survey that was conducted April and May and June that had it number 3 out of about 30 options. It dropped a little bit this year, 2015. We just didn't have as much drought, but it's still really, really high on growers' minds, particularly when the top ones are glyphosate resistant weeds and input cost. So it's a big concern for growers. And we need resilient systems for across the U.S. There's so much diversity in rainfall and temperatures, soil types, that one size doesn't fit all is absolutely the mantra for agriculture. So let me wrap up with just 2 concluding slides. One is the long view. We hinted at that a little bit, but farmers very much take the long view. They love their lifestyle, and they want to pass it on to their children and grandchildren, and so they recognize that the soil health, the financial health, all those things that they see intrinsic to that field are critical to pass it on. So they very much are in the time frame of climate change, that 30, 40-year time frame out there. But also they're making long-term business decisions. Do they want to relocate? Do they want to sell some land or buy some land or install irrigation? You saw the huge expenses. These are some long-term decisions. So very much, it's not just a day-to-day. Sure, we have to make decisions, but we also have to plan for a very far-reaching future. So let me just conclude with one suggestion and then a couple other additional requests, some that I may capture. But in terms of farmers, I hope that convinced you that it's really easy to engage with farmers when you bring value. Dr. Zach got up and gave a talk to about 100 growers who went up 2 days, and they were spellbound. John didn't pull any punches. He put up some tough graphs, and they loved it because they saw that John was bringing value. A very good trick is to cultivate the producer leadership. You know how it is. You have one grower that is a halfway decent speaker who's well respected. He gets up and says, "This is important. It will fly. It moves." So you don't need a whole lot of grower leaders to move a whole bunch of political influence, particularly here in West Texas. A couple requests. Help build resilience. Boy, that's a really, really tough one against extreme events. We just hate to see the devastation that can occur when you have events like 2011. Whatever we can do, whether it's avoiding planting or totally different production, different crops, we really need to help on that. I think we need to do a much better job of integrating the whole continuum of weather and climate. I apologize for being extremely sloppy with my terminology on that. Unfortunately, that's the way a lot of agriculturalists think, that the two really get blended together. But anything that we can do to help them incorporate that in their decision making. And the last point, if we could have a 30-day forecast, wouldn't that be outstanding? Amount of farming productivity would just go through the roof if that would happen. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you, John, for inviting me.